And thanks again to MFRT, especially the Art Circle, for inviting us back. It's always a pleasure to come and talk to all of you. My topic for today, while I'm going to be not running through the slides, because in the interest of time, I think that if I'm not able to communicate the central message of my presentation by talking to you, I won't be doing a good job if I have to use slides for it. And it's not a very complicated topic for me to speak through. Now, one of the most important things in an agenda like this is to listen to speakers, give their wisdom, give their 2 bits of knowledge, so that all of you can go back and hopefully use some of it while you're interacting with your customers. But I have a healthy skepticism to the wisdom given by experts. While I read a lot and I listen to a lot of them, at the end of the day, I have to make my own opinion. So there was a time early on in mutual fund distribution when I used to give this example, and I used to ask distributors, because there was a healthy skepticism around mutual funds. Even today, customers are not very sure or are confused about how mutual funds can help them. So I used to give this example to an audience of people and ask everybody, how many of you have ever flown in an aircraft? Can I see a show of hands of how many of you have actually gone in an aircraft? Literally the entire audience. And then I say that, have you ever asked the pilot before you got on that, are you very sure that you will land the aircraft where I want to go, or will you dump me in the ocean, or, you never ask. You just get on board. Because you trust the system. You trust that the aircraft is technologically very competent for it to take off and land, and a lot of safety measures are built into it. Now, if you realize when you get onto an aircraft, the first thing you get from the airline company is risk factors. What is the first demonstration that the crew does? That if the flight were to land on water, this is what you do. If the oxygen falls down, this is what you do. This is all risk factors. They're telling you that all of this is possible every flight you take. But what is most people sitting in an aircraft doing when that demonstration is going on? You're hardly even looking at it. You're reading your newspaper, or you're talking to somebody who's next to you, or you're trying to sleep. And even though it is such a big risk factor, they're talking about your life, you don't listen to it, because you again trust the system. You get on the flight, and there can be many a times turbulence, and you see people praying before the flight takes off and all of that. There's a lot of turbulence, but you don't take a parachute and jump out of the aircraft. And so I used to tell IFAs and I used to tell customer audiences that mutual funds, please trust the system. It is built. There is diversification, there is a professional set of people looking at it, there are rules and regulations set up by SEBI which are extremely strict. We are the most audited industry in this world, and definitely in India. So please trust the system, get on board for the long term, you will reach your destination. If there is some bit of market movement up and down, don't worry, don't jump out, stay the course, and you will reach your destination. So I used to get a lot of claps when I used to say this example. People say, Ajit, you said a fantastic example. This is really true. But once when I made that example at the end of the session, a reasonably elderly gentleman, an IFA, came up to me and said, Ajit, your example was fantastic. It really resonated with all of us. But there's one small problem. And I said, sir, what's the problem? He said, you see, when the aircraft crashes, the pilot dies with it. But when your mutual fund performance goes down, the fund manager just jumps a job. I touched his feet and I said, I'll never give this example again. The moral of the story is that you can take advice and wisdom from a lot of people, but let me tell you that because you experience customers on a daily basis, you know the reality, you know the questions they ask you. The monkey is always on your back to explain why markets went down, this product didn't do well, and all of that, not manufacturers. We manufacture products and we give it to you, as Ashish said earlier. If there were so many experts in the world, the financial crisis should not have happened. It happened, and we are all living through it. We have our own problems in our business because of it. So, while you get thrown a lot of information, you get thrown a lot of statistics, and we all live our life by numbers. Remember, there's a very famous quote. That's it, by Mark Twain actually, who said that statistics is a very strange thing. If you have one leg on burning coal and your other leg on a slab of ice, statistically on average you're supposed to be comfortable. So don't trust statistics also. Having said all of that, I have a point, given the fact that being part of an organization like DSP BlackRock, and BlackRock, as you know, is the largest asset manager in the world, there are experiences, there are feedback that we get from around the world, and my presentation today, and I'll try and keep it short, is to give you what is it that BlackRock is seeing as feedback from investors, distributors around the world. What are the trends that they are seeing? Many of you may already know it, but let me take you through it. The first trend that is developing across the world is that we all know asset allocation. We live our professions by asset allocation. We have enough research to say that 90 to 97% of the returns for a customer is decided by asset allocation. It's only the balance 3 or 4% that is decided by stock selection and this and that and all the other factors. Now, asset allocation is based on a simple principle that you put your money in different baskets, equities and commodities and fixed income and all of that, because the correlation between these asset classes are different. That will give you a balance in your portfolio. The trend that BlackRock is seeing around the world is that when there are times of crisis, financial crisis, economic crisis that we are going through, the correlations between many asset classes start becoming the same. So your asset allocation also sometimes doesn't work the way you want it to. We don't think that the problems that the world is facing is going to be solved next month or even next year. It can continue for a long time, which means that there will be a lot of volatility around all asset classes, whether it is commodities or real estate or equity, and within equity, large cap and mid cap and micro cap, and all the different segments that we are all very well aware of. Those correlations are converging and is not helping too much, and it could be a long-term phenomenon. So what is the advice or the lesson in this for us as distributors? The lesson is that don't be fixated with just 1 or 2 products for your customer. Try and add as many product categories that you can to offer to your investors. So think about corporate bonds or corporate deposits, think about real estate, think about understanding commodities and if there is ways and means of investing in it. Right now we only use gold and gold ETFs and all of that. So the simple message for the first trend is that if we are going to go through volatile times for many more years to come, it is important for us as distributors and advisors to learn about more and more products that are available in the market and have the ability to offer them to your customer. Because only then will you be able to allocate risk for your customers. And that's important. That's the first trend. The second trend that we are all aware of, and I think it's been spoken in earlier forums as well, is the fact that the world is going increasingly digital. People are today not necessarily asking friends and family about where they should put their money. They're going online, they're searching for it. There is so much of information in the last 5-10 years that is available today as opposed to many years ago. The customer was dependent on his stockbroker for much of the information, and that was the only financial thing that happened, stockbroking. The world has progressed, technology has progressed, there is so much information, so much of news media, so many channels, so many newspapers that the investors have a lot of information with them. And that's the second trend that is developing, and we have to keep ourselves updated. But the lesson in it and the trend that BlackRock is seeing around the world is that all of that information is not meaning that customers therefore now can take their own decisions. Actually, all of that information is creating confusion, and the investors are looking more now for advisors than ever before to help them navigate all that confusion and do something which is meaningful for them. So the more you are updated, the more you have the information, it helps for you to understand that there is a digital growth happening and there is a lot of information. And as Raghu mentioned earlier in his talk as well, it is something not to be scared about. It is something to be intrigued about. It is something to learn. It is something to embrace. There's a famous quote which I know that pretty much the entire room may know. Those who live by the sword. Can you complete that quote for me? Die by the sword. There is a variation to that quote. Those who live by the sword are likely to get shot. Because if you're continuously living only in a sword world, you don't realize technology has moved, you now have guns to shoot. Right? And therefore it's important that as and when newer technologies come in, there are newer abilities, processes, the props as Ashish spoke about earlier, please embrace them. And it's a trend that's developing in the world. The earlier you adapt and adopt, the better. That's the second trend. The third trend that is happening world over, and I must admit that it's not so much in India, is the fact that the world is getting older. And the distribution phase of a person's life is becoming more important than the accumulation phase. Now, the reason why it's not so much applicable in India is because we know ourselves as a very young country. We know that the US, Europe, Japan in particular has older generation of people, much more older, and India is very, very young. The simple point here is that to realize that if volatility is going to remain over the next 5, 10 or more years, the distribution phase of a person's life, after he's made his money, if he's got a little wealth, how he will manage it till he dies and how he will pass it on to his next generation is a very, very important need that is developing. And across other countries, many IFAs are now becoming specialists. They're specializing in, say for example, retirement. Not, sometimes we feel that, you take a machine gun out and try and get as many customers as you want. And here the funda is that if you become a specialist, you will have a better client consistency, you will have better references because you're known as a specialist in something. You're able to advise somebody on one aspect of his life goals, financial goals, which is probably one of the most important ones for the client. In India, even though we say that retirement is not something that's more important than children's education, for instance, please remember that we're such a large country that in absolute numbers, we also have a lot of old people, elderly people who have finished their working life and are looking for advice in terms of how they can stretch that money longer. And the reason for it is medical technology has grown so much that people aren't dying earlier as before. They're living longer and longer, and that money needs to be stretched for a much longer time now than before. And therefore, the third trend is the fact that there are specific segments and needs for people, and you could think about in your practice to try and specialize on one aspect which can probably bring you more customers which are consistent with you, and that may help the business as well. The fourth and the last trend that I'll talk about before ending my discussion is the fact that IFAs worldwide or distributors worldwide are not now doing everything themselves. So I know that though I wasn't here yesterday, that you would have heard from Sumit about will and estate planning, and there are distributors abroad who only focus on philanthropy, helping clients give their money for good causes, selecting those causes, doing due diligence and allocating the money, just specializing in that. And there are rich high net worth people who have that also as a need. So whether it is planning on education, planning on retirement, planning for your insurance, planning for will and estate planning, and many other aspects of it, you don't need to do all of this yourself. I think MFRT probably, as it goes along, one of the best things it can do is to bring the services which you can actually outsource as a group to other specialists, whether they be lawyers or chartered accountants or tax consultants, and give your customers all aspects of the financial planning that he really deserves. Many of you may not want to go there because you're still just pure execution, but many of you who are thinking of advisory, thinking of moving in that direction, maybe one of the ways to do it is not to try and do everything yourself, but to outsource it. And we are in a country known for outsourcing. There are enough services available out there, specialists whom you can tie up with individually or maybe as a group, and take those services to your customers, which can slowly build on the advisory practice. So that's the fourth trend that is happening worldwide, and hopefully even in India, the advisors who want to grow their business and who want to build it up will probably think in that direction and work together, actually collaborate more, rather than just doing everything individually, collaborate more through forums like the MFRT and bring those services together that you can offer your customer. So those are the 4 trends that BlackRock sees around the world, and I hope that that can give you some ideas in the way that you can deal with customers. I'll end with a quote from Winston Churchill, who said that we all face moments of decision in our life, whether they're regulatory changes, market changes, economic changes, so many other changes. Customers themselves go through many changes. So he said that when you come to a moment of decision, the best thing to do is the right thing. The next best thing to do is the wrong thing. But the worst thing to do is nothing. So stand up, and I think as a group, I'm sure that you will find the ways to progress the business, progress your own business and of the community and of the industry. Thank you very much.